This video is going to introduce you to the coding query within NVivo. You can see here that I'm in the sample project that's available in all installations of NVivo. The coding query can be accessed by going to Query and clicking on Coding. At its most basic level, the coding query is exactly the same as going to Nodes and going to your nodes and double clicking on a theme. So it's basically querying your sources to look for references within them. So it's going to give you results like this. The difference between doing this and going to query and coding query, however, is that we get a lot more options in this dialog to select how we're going to bring those codes in together. So, for example, I could search for one of my codes. So if I take the theme of, say, policy management and click OK. Now, if I just run this, it's just going to do the same as if I clicked on policy management. However, one thing that I can do with this version of the query is I can just do it for selected items. So if I go in here and go into my internals and say just tick the interviews, what this will do when I run it is it's going to run that query, but it's only going to find the results of it as they appear within in the interviews and not all sources. This can be really useful if you have multiple types of participant or source and you want to look at having just one set of themes that go across them. But at a later date you want to be able to see where the themes appear in, say, just your teachers versus your head teachers, or your managers versus your employees, or any such mix. In this case we're separating out literature from interviews. So lots of different ways we can use this to explore. It is, however, far more complicated than that if you want. If you look at the top here, we've got the option of having all of the statements true or any of the statements true. So you'll see here I can add in extra layers of logic, you could say, to bring these things together. So for all of them to be true, every single row must essentially overlap in some way. For any of them to be true, it's just going to combine them for us. So you've just got to read the sentences across to see what the query is going to do. So any of these straight rules here must be true. So the first one we've already got in, that's coded at policy management, and that's in the interviews. So I could go in here, for example, and I could bring in another, let's go for real estate development theme there. And if I click on the minus, it's going to remove that row. If I click on a plus, it'll bring another row in. So if we just run that with these two together, what this will do is it's going to return the results for things that are coded at policy management and real estate development in just the interview. So I can combine things together with this kind of query. If I close this down, let's go back in there again, query, coding query, and we can explore some more of the options that we have within this query. So you'll notice at this point here within the logic, I can also go for any selected node, all selected nodes, or any case where. And it's really easy to get these mixed up. If you leave it as it is by default at all selected nodes, those nodes need to overlap. So if I choose two themes and no text is coded at both of those themes at the same time, I'm going to get no results. So if I just select, say, this theme and this theme and run the query, if these themes at no point overlap, it would just error. But I can see at some point, James has this memorable quote here, and it's got the word fish in it, so it has produced something, but only where those two things overlap. If I change that to any selected node and run it, I'm going to get everything under fish and everything under memorable quotes together. So the logic at each of these levels really does dramatically change the kind of results that you can get from this query. So if I close this again and let's open it up, so once again, query and coding query. The final thing we can do with this, as well as combining multiple layers to it, not only can we look at things that are coded at, we can also look at things that are not coded at. So this time I could, for example, I'm going to go in and selected items again, so we can use this to tick any particular thing. So let's go into cases and people, and I'm going to tick this so I can tick all of the interview participants. Once again, this layout is linked to the sample project we're working at. When you're doing this in your own project, you might have stored things in different folders, so just be aware it'll look a little bit different at this stage. So I'm just looking at the words of the participants here, and I'm going to bring in some coding. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select some of the nodes here. So that's everything to do with these attitude things, so related to environmental and water quality. But this time I'm going to put it as not coded at. So what this will do actually is it'll get me things from those interviews that are explicitly not coded at any of the themes that I've selected. So this is everything else outside of those themes there. So I could use this as a researcher just to double check that this is all the stuff that's not coded at any of those themes, so I can just read it to make sure I've not missed anything. Lots of different ways we can use this query. Much like any of the other queries, I can add it to the project. So if I add it to the project, and I'm just going to call this, not coded at attitude, I'll just abbreviate that there. It's going to save it under your navigation view queries, and if I go to queries here, we can see it'll be in this list here. So not coded at. So at any point, if I close this, instead of putting all of those options in again, I can just double click here and it's going to load back those same results for me. Similarly, not only can I just save the question or the query itself, I can also save the results of that. So if I wait for this to load, I can save those results, and you can see they can either be saved as a new node, new case, or they can be just saved in this results folder over here. So if I save these as a node, for example, I could call it not coded at attitude, save that, and it's going to open those results up for me. But fundamentally, what that will have done is it will have created a new node or a new theme that has all of that text within it. So I'll be able to find it under my nodes, and it's just stored in here. So lots of things that we can do with this this coding query. If at any point you put anything in and there's no overlap, it will just say the query generated no results. If that happens, it just means that no point do those things overlap. So for example, if you'd have looked for theme A and you'd looked for that in the managers and it errored, it would mean at no point did theme A was it discussed by the managers. The important thing about this query, of course, is it's looking at your coding or the codes you've already created or automated. You won't find any results if you hadn't done that manual coding process beforehand. So this is one of those kind of queries that you do need to explore with and play with a fair bit, but there's a lot of optionality in there and stuff that you can really unpack your results with.